Hi, Jake Gyllenhaal.
Hello, David Gordon Green.
This is a funny time for us to be having this conversation. First of all, thank you guys for coming out. Thanks to Southpaw for hosting this event and Fox Searchlight for this awesome movie coming out called Demolition that you all enjoy. But this is a funny time for Jake and I because we've been hanging out every day for the last few months prepping this movie. So we're going to expose all the raw nerves of two nerds in a collaboration and that kind of anxiety, beautiful insecurity of the eve of production of a new movie. So it's fun to be able to do it somewhat in public. Some of the headbutting, some of the cat scratches across the face that he does. But it is cool. It's also just a great time for for us as film lovers to watch Jake Gyllenhaal movies. It's been really cool for me over the last few years, just seeing someone that takes the beauty of kind of character actor essence, great character roles, the kind of mannered nuances of character, and finds a way to infuse that into wonderful, commercial, relatable movie-going experiences. So lots to talk about today. I thought we'd kind of shoot the breeze for a little bit and then open it up for questions. You have anything you want to say, kind of an introductory song or anything?
I want to say that it's just because it's a conversation between the two of us from our creative collaboration and the spirit of you being my coach and me being your quarterback and the next thing that we're about to do. It's pretty incredible to be working with someone and also be talking with someone who is not only from here but also has the ability to kind of navigate through so many different types of genres, take somebody who's courageous and talented to be able to do that. And I really am excited to work with you, and I'm excited to be talking with you today. So I just need to say that from my side.
Sweet.
Awesome.
Well, first of all, one of the things I think is interesting about Jake is his years ago. It's not interesting about him, interesting about his father. His father, years ago, his father was a mentor of mine at the Sundance Directors Lab. So I had written a movie called All the Real Girls, and his father was one of the mentors of mine at this lab. And I remember him, like one of the last things he said to me is he said, "I hope you get to make a movie with my son. I think you guys would get along." And so I didn't really know what he meant by that, but now that we've been working together and actually had breakfast with his father a couple weeks ago, I kind of see that, like two like-minded folks that want to push the envelope of what's out there and doing things that audiences can embrace, but also bring something personal, something a little left of center to the roles. I guess I would love to start by you talking about what it is that draws you to a role.
I mean, first and foremost, I think that it's the story more than it is even the role, because it's sort of the story feels to me like the ship that you're going to be going out in, and then if you don't have a solid one, then you get in rough waters, pretty much screwed. So to me, it's really that initially, sort of, what is this whole thing saying? Does it have something to say? Does it have something to say beyond the entertainment of it, just the fun factor? And does it have something that is fun, that's entertaining, that's filled with tension? And do I want to move to the next scene? And then ultimately, do I want to know what's going on with these characters? And then I ask myself, would it be cool to play this part? And then to me, sometimes it's written fully. It's all there, and all you have to do is fill in the blanks, color. It's like a coloring book. And then sometimes you have to create things that are sort of not completely there and create them with the director or on your own in the private of the odd space that is I always say it's sort of like behind the black curtain, like tinkering away with little things, trying to figure out choices and whether or not they could work. And that's sort of ultimately what it's about. But it has to have something to say beyond just this is an entertaining story. It has to have a resonance, whether something going on today or something relatable to me, because I believe really deeply in the unconscious of a story and in the unconscious, not just the conscious experience. So it has to have something underneath.
Being a very accomplished and confident actor, do you have, does fear ever play a role in either inviting you into something or scaring you away from it?
Absolutely. I mean, if
It does
there's
for
this,
me. I always feel
yeah,
like if it feels like I've got an anxiety about it or it seems almost repulsive at first, then that's usually what I wake up the next morning thinking about or wondering about. I don't know.
yeah, I always have to ask myself what I'm actually afraid of. Like sometimes I'm afraid because it's bad, and I know it, and someone's trying to convince me of it. And then sometimes I'm afraid because it's asking something of me that I'm afraid of it myself. And obviously they both start with a bit of a panic attack. You know, you're kind of like, you know, and then you have to take a second to differentiate. So yeah, to me, how big is the chasm? How can I get across that? How can I get to that character? Do I have to go all the way around? Can I go over? What is it? Can I get there? Do I have to jump and like risk it? You know? So yeah, fear is definitely a huge part of it. I think that's the thrill, you know? That's the high of it.
Yeah. I think it's fun. Like, for those of you who haven't seen Demolition yet, when I was watching it, I'm really drawn to, like, I'm sure there's far stronger ways to pitch and promote the movie, but what I'm drawn to is it's kind of about a guy that gets his money stuck in a vending machine, you know? And that's, to me, like a beautiful, or a guy that hears the hinge on a bathroom door squeak, and that's what he becomes obsessed with. Like these things that I think a lot of films get lost in the overall, you know, scope and scale of the concept and forget the little nuances of character. And I really do think it's something that's fun to watch, a performance that does feel like drawn from the intimacy of character rather than the just the enormity of concept. It's fun.
Yeah, I mean, this movie is about, you know, takes all those conventional ideas, and then it sort of, every time you think you're going down the road of convention, it's using convention, which is fun to watch, and then it just like sideswipes you, and then you go down another. Oh, I think I know where. Oh, whoa, what? I think I know where. Whoa, what? And that's basically the experience. In the midst of it, also, that it's a journey of a guy who's dealing with something where we have expectations as a viewer so often that there's this profound resolution, like this catharsis, you know, and really I think change comes in subtleties, and that's what the movie's about. Like you're saying, it's like these subtle little things that happen, and all of a sudden you sort of find yourself as a different person, and you're not really quite sure how you got there. And also, I liked it because it was about, there was a character who was dealing or feeling, it was apathy, was something to explore. You know, so often emoting and presenting all these feelings is really what people consider performance, or people who we're used to seeing, when ultimately, like, apathy is actually an equally relatable and equally important thing. You know, I mean, we walk around, I speak for myself, a lot of the time not really quite sure how I feel until I take a moment to try and figure it out. And most of the time I'm trying to run from them anyway. So that's sort of what the movie's about. Like when the door squeaks and you hear that squeak, which I know you relate to because you like squeaky doors. And like, I, you know, that's what it's about to me. I loved that scene when I read it. It was like, what are we going to do in this scene when the character gets to move a door back and forth and gets obsessed with the squeaking and is excited about it? Like, what is that? I love that. You know, people don't write that. Usually, character walks through the bathroom door into somewhere else after they cry into the, you know, it's like, it's not, that wasn't what's happening in this movie. I remember being, I don't even know how little I was, but Sidney Lumet always had rehearsals, right? There was like 2 weeks of mandatory rehearsals in his movies, where there was a rehearsal room and the writer was always included. And I remember sitting with my mom, because I was really young. I was like 5 or something like that. And we didn't have a babysitter or anything like that, so I would just sit in the back while they would rehearse, and it was like River Phoenix and Martha Plimpton, and I had a huge crush on Martha Plimpton, and I sat in on rehearsals. I don't even really remember them, but I do remember the process of exploration, kind of that feeling that there were no rules in that space, you know. I remember River Phoenix asking questions about things that he wasn't sure about, that he didn't really know, and then it would resolve something in the screenplay where, you know, it read well, but then it wouldn't be playable, and he would ask the question, and all of a sudden it would become playable and emotional, and then all of a sudden you could see the actor's instinct kind of open up into a scene. And I mean, I remember also, like, Sidney Lumet finishing the day really early, you know, everyone going home early because he got what he wanted, like, in 6 hours, you know. I remember all these really weird things and had no idea who I was around. That's the best thing I could say. And it's not until now that I realized what an extraordinary privilege and amazing time it was to be amongst that. But, you know, what I also saw was a profound respect for the writer. You know, she happened to be my mother, but but I think I've tried to carry that through everything, is this respect for that process, the process that happens when an actor comes on and all that stuff that is 2D becomes 3D, and the imperfections of the interpretation the actor's going to have comes in, whether they're intelligent or they're not. I speak for myself with the latter. And you know, that process is when you have to let go of control.
But it's very Demolition of you in the process, and we've been going through that last few weeks. Is like just taking it all apart, seeing what the essence, seeing what the struggle, seeing how it all adds up to something beyond what you initially suspected it would.
Yeah, but I mean, you and I got involved in the movie we're about to do for a reason, because it touched our hearts. You know, it touched our hearts for different reasons, probably from different places. For some reason we are not necessarily so sure of. Like, we are all together for a particular reason, but everybody involved in that process obviously did too. But we're the ones who got to go in and try and make it work. You know, and so discovering that with each other means I have to understand where you are and you have to understand where I am. And that's what's pretty amazing about you, is you have this real egoless process where you allow for that instinct to come through. And I think somewhere all the best directors I've ever worked with have always allowed for those ideas to happen, and then sneakily, in the smartest way, they get their way, you know? And don't think I don't know what you're doing. Like, and that is, I think, that's the best process, because ultimately it is your movie, and ultimately it is your vision, and it's really fun when a director makes you feel like you're a part of their vision, when you're a part of the process.
How does stage work? For those of you who don't know, it's got a great body of work that Jake does in the theater, and I'd be curious how that process, you know, when it's not the director taking what you've done, running away and putting it together as we want, but it's the same. I imagine similar process of construction, and then you've got the stage.
Yeah, I mean, it's a profoundly fascinating and humbling experience in that, like, you really also, again, start to see, particularly if you have the opportunity to have, if you do a run, for instance, and then you do your run, and then another cast takes over, if it's successful and you get to watch that show, you start to see the power of the writing again, just come right through again, and you see you are just in service of your interpretation of a thing if it's really good. And, you know, for me, yes, as an actor, to come on stage and say, I get to tell this story every night, like, I get to have control over the interpretation of the words, is fun. But then when you watch from the other side, you can have a crappy night on stage, or you think, and everybody thinks it's great. It's like the most incongruous experience with the audience. So, you know, you start to realize, you start to see that you are projecting all this shit all the time. You know, and so you have this experience where you go, I suck. You know, and everyone's like, oh, that was fantastic. Or you come on stage, like, I was amazing. And everyone's like, oh, great job. It was really, you know. And so you start to realize that you have no ability to judge what you do. And so for me, I go, well, if I have no way of controlling that, I got to let go and do it. So it's given me an opportunity in movies to have a whole different perspective, which is I have no control in the scene. You know, the universe is going to give us what it's going to give us. I mean, we've been hit with weird scheduling things on our movie, and I know somewhere, like the universe, and this, I'm sorry to sound lofty, but I really feel like that's what we're dealt, you know what I mean? And we're just making a movie, you know? The world does that to us all the time, as in our lives. Like, in a movie, even though when you're making it, you think it's the most important thing in the world, like, it hits you and you got to go, okay, this is a gift, you know? Somewhere this is a gift. I mean, you do that all the time. I mean, it's really inspiring to me, I have to say, and I'm sorry to be kissing your ass, but I have to, because we're about to start working together, and, you know, this is the process I have to do to manipulate too, you know, but, no, but, but it is really actually, but also, in all honesty, I think, you know, at this point, I'm not gonna bullshit, so, like, it is really inspiring to work with someone who allows for that, and who's like, all right, we're going to do it. We're going to figure it out, And if we can't figure it out, and, I'll hurt some people and make sure we do get it figured out. And that's I would do the same thing in the opposite direction. But that comes from being on stage and realizing it's the essence of what you're doing that's being communicated. We argue, we get excited, whatever we do in the details every day. But what we don't see is that the reason you start and the start of something is how it continues and how it finishes. And it's all about that essential little thing that goes, I want to do this.
And how, it's been fun too, working with Jake, because he's not afraid of the world around him. I work with a lot of actors or, celebrities of note that will, kind of hide from the world, but it's fun just to go to a normal restaurant or grab coffee at the place or walk the dog or whatever it is that's a very normal life and routine. There was a funny time the other day where we were having dinner or having lunch with Tatiana in Boston, and the waitress, you could tell, you get the look. I can see the world around him when he's walking in to sit down. People recognize him, and then she's like, "Excuse me, are you Seth Green?" I just had to tell that little anecdote because it made me I was happy for a month. I was like, But there's also that little ego. She's like, oh, she probably thinks he's an actor, but she's absorbing Green, my last name. So she's like, there's part of me in her recognition of him. It was pretty awesome. But just to be able to, have a, your life is your stage, your movies, and it's just exciting to you don't let the world kind of stop around that. You're just a part of the painting of your own life, which I think is really great. I wanted to open it up for audience questions, see if there's any insights or quips. Yeah, right there. I think is there a microphone, or what's over there? There's a. So we can do this very in a civilized queue. Look at that.
Oh.
All right.
Do I get to ask you now?
Yeah.
Okay.
Now's the time.
Jake, you're a master at playing unbalanced characters. And there's a remarkable authenticity to it, and I should know because I'm a psychologist. And I'm wondering what the mix is. There's pure talent, your exposure, you've been in movies all your life. You've learned from other people, or you've actually encountered people who are like, say, the character in Demolition. So what is the mix for that, would you say?
Well, I think there are two parts to that. One is that I find it more disturbing when you're in a movie where I feel like emotions are being conveyed as one thing in a world where you're told you're supposed to kiss like this, or you're supposed to love like this, or you're supposed to get angry because of this. You're not supposed to laugh at it or cry at it or whatever your particular individual feeling is. So I find that more disturbing, honestly. I find that more unbalanced. Mm-hmm. I still can't help but watch movies like that, and I love them. But in terms of somebody who knows you're going to spend 6 months, a year of your life doing something, I want to ask myself different questions.
So this is something you've perfected along the way.
Well, what I think is that we all have everything in all of us. I think, I do this, I got this from my dad. I speak kind of grandiose, so I apologize. I'll speak for myself when I say that I believe I can understand why people do what they do, even when it's unfathomable, when it's bad, or even when it's the deepest type of loving, most compassionate thing. I want to understand. I don't want to sit there and watch and judge, separate myself from a situation. And so I think that's the beauty of the job that I get to do, is that I get to go and do that. That's what we get to do if you're an actor in whatever form. And I believe in also that we are all actors. We're acting from the beginning of our life, People put us in a corner and say that we're this, and we try and do this, and we feel we hide this, we don't hide that, We're doing it all over the place. So I believe that also about a character, and so I find characters that I think are struggling with things. Yes, going to worlds where I can look at that thing in myself, and I always joke, I did this movie called Nightcrawler, and everyone always says like, "Oh, he's so unhinged." He's like, "He's so unhinged." I was like, "That's the closest to me that like you're gonna get, you know." That's just a message to filmmakers out there. See who has the balls to work with me. But I just like that to me is what it's about, just to me. So, thank you. And you do a beautiful job. That's a hard job you do, much harder than mine. So.
Hi. Just to piggyback a little bit off of that question, the authenticity, one of the best things about you as an actor is I don't see you as Jake in your movies. You become your characters. So my question is there any role that you've ever immersed yourself so much that maybe you lost yourself, like as your own being? And how do you deal with that?
Yeah, the answer for yes. I've tried many different techniques, to try and get under the skin of something. And sometimes those techniques, whether it's like, I see the character this way, I'm going to like lose weight or something. And then all of a sudden, chemically, you do some funny things to yourself and you're like really cranky, that's one thing. And then you have to figure that out. Or you're in a world where, like you have to I believe you have to. When I did this movie called Prisoners, and I was like, you really have to be able to like. I'm doing that just so you can applaud when I say the title movie. But I did that movie, and I was like, there's the way in which you can say, I'm going to play a cop, or you can go in and you can say, this happens to people all the time. And do I have the courage to be able to go into that world and ask myself what it might feel like to actually be in there? So, like in that space, it affects you. And paranoia is rampant, You're playing a detective who's dealing with child abduction, and you're watching real cases and investigations when you're doing your research about those things happening. You're talking to real people, and after a while, you start to go, the world is a horrible place, And you start to separate that space from playing with my nieces, It's like so your mind starts to work in very particular ways, and you want it to within that context. So it does affect you, yes, but that's what craft is all about. That's why I believe deeply in the craft of acting. I don't think method acting, whatever that is everything. I think imagination is everything to acting. You need your imagination. You can't just fully get into a world. So craft is everything. It is, again, to use the boat metaphor, because it's all I got today. It is really that, it's that ship, that carries you through those moments where you lose your way a bit. There are going to be those moments, and if you have that craft, you always have something to hold on to. Yeah. Ask the psychologist. I don't know.
Hi, Jake. So my question to you is can you think of a single experience that really pushed your understanding of your craft?
No. No. Well, since Jean-Marc is here, I get to compliment him too, because I'm always looking for a job. Jean-Marc Vallee is here, who directed Demolition. It's his movie. Jean-Marc shoots in a very beautiful way, very particular. There's never lighting. There's, you come to set. There's no makeup. You put on your costume. You're on set 5 minutes later. It's just, and you're shooting. Your call time's 5 a.m. You're shooting at 5:15. And that's rare in the process. And I don't know if it's like where your craft is pushed, but what was amazing was he comes in and he'll come in for a close-up, then he'll next take, instead of going for another close-up, he'll run across the street and he'll get a wide shot, and then he'll come back in and you'll get a 2-shot, then he'll be like, I'm gonna try it dirty over the shoulder, and then oh wait, let's go to the close-up again, And I think you need to have craft to be able to move within the absolute freedom that he gives you as an actor. I was saying earlier with him, I said, you always want freedom. It's what we try and create. It's the best thing, right? And I have all these techniques, I can create my own space so I can give a performance where I feel. But when a director says, here you go, you go whoa, wait, I need to fight for this, I don't. And you have to rely on craft as everything's moving around you. So I would give that as an example.
Thank you.
Hi, Jake. Very interesting conversation. I'm enjoying the themes that you've laid out very much. What I wanted to ask you was, we were talking about troubled characters and creating empathy and compelling stories, and you kind of quipped that we're just making a movie at the end of the day, right? Well, how can we tell stories that do change the world? And I feel that you create empathy within your characters, and that does bring about some sort of solace for people who are going through similar things. But how do we tell grander stories, which bring communities together, which bring people together? And are you looking for those things?
How we do it is I can't say. I can really only speak for myself, like how I want to do it, which is I think it's a balance of self-reflection enough that you ask yourself what you actually believe in, not what you want people to like. I don't think it's all about making movies that people deem important, or political. I do inherently believe that all movies are political, regardless of what they are, what they're saying, whether they're overtly political and saying something about that, or whether they're taking us to another world to ignore the world in which we live, or adventure in somewhere else. So I do believe that, but I think it's just about being able to ask yourself what you actually really love. I spend a lot of time saying, well, what do other people like? Like, what will an audience like? What will they enjoy? And I think I've discovered over enough time, being lucky enough to be able to do this for a while, that if I ask myself what really moves me, I think people start to gather around and enjoy it too. And I think that's a common mistake, that I think we will move to a place where we all actually want to be if we ask ourselves what we really believe in, as opposed to what other people are telling us to believe in. And so that's what I think.
Thank you very much, and looking very forward to Demolition.
Thanks.
Super glad it's not a superhero movie.
Huh?
I'm glad it's not a superhero movie.
Well, I mean, they have inspired, superhero movies have inspired me. I mean, I remember when I saw Thor, I was like really inspired. I really was. I walked out and I was like, there's a reason for myth. There's a reason for those things. They are so moving and so important. They are, again, a foundation. And sometimes I'm in a scene and I'm playing, as some people might interpret, a sociopath, and I'm being motivated by Thor. So try that hat on for size.
Yeah, hi. I don't want this to sound too much down to earth, but watching movies with you, I'm always a bit disturbed with your weight. I mean, on Wednesday, I go to the movie theater and I'm watching The Enemy, in which you're like, that. And on Friday, I go for Southpaw, in which you're like, And I know this has something to do with the movie distribution in Poland, maybe, but to what extent... To what extent is it like Hollywood characterization mumbo-jumbo, and to what you need to work with your body? And for real, how much does it influence you? I mean, not only physically, but, looking into the mirror and be someone totally different. I think it has to be more than just shaving your head,
It's really about film stock and lens choice, because I'm really long sometimes, and then other... like anamorphic lenses close up make me look like cross eyes. No, I which is actually true, and it's really weird because I have big eyes, so it's like there have actually been a couple times on like anamorphic where they get really close and they're like, the DP will whisper to the director and they'll be like, what's going on? They're like, he looks like he's kind of disturbed. Like, is there something wrong with him? And then like you'll see the DP and be like, what the fuck? Like, so it may be film stock and lens choice, some of that. But seriously, I think it is a problem with Polish distribute. No, I think that you know, some characters inspire me in different ways. You know, a lot of people, in my opinion, on a relatively shallow level, when you're doing, you know, when you're trying to tell a story in press, for instance, everyone says like, well, how'd you get in shape for Southpaw? Well, I go, I didn't know how to box before I started that movie, you know? And I was pretty terrified, speaking of being afraid, that I was going to look like an idiot because Antoine Fuqua told me that I wasn't going to have a double. So I learned over 5 months how to box. And in learning how to box, you get in really good shape, you know? And all of those things that come with the personality of a boxer start to come in. You start to like to show that off. You start, you know, your body becomes a very particular thing to you. But yeah, I mean, I do believe that certain characters call for different things. There's some that don't call for a physical shift, but I also think you have to be very safe. You know, I was talking to an actor, and they were saying to me, whoa, I know you do things, you try and really get in the real world when you're doing whatever you're doing. Like, I'm playing a heroin addict. And I was like, okay. You know? That's why craft is important, you know? But I, you know, I do believe in trying to give the audience an experience, a real experience. I'm not in this to like, I'm in this to play a character, you know? And I think people go through different things, you know? This movie we're about to make, the guy I'm about to play has gone through things that most of us in the world will never experience, and is one of the most incredible people that I have ever met. And I mean, I got a splinter in my foot the other day, and I was like, "Ow, man, damn, that hurt so much trying to take it out." Like, and I was like, "Damn," and then I was like, "Dude, you're playing a guy who had both of his legs blown off." Like, you know, I mean, really, in a situation that was. So I think those types of things are like, comparatively as an actor, you're like, it's ridiculous. But I just believe in trying to change yourself or your personality, your internal, but internal it has to come from the inside first. But that's a long-winded answer.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Hey, I didn't realize Jean-Marc is here, which leads to my question. I want to ask you about your apparent love for Québécois directors, and also if you've learned a little French along the way.
They love me. I mean, I don't know. Well, I would just say that there is something cultural about, you know, that part of the world that artistically just we line up. I don't know. They are adventurers. There's something to be said about a real definition of style. Both Denis Villeneuve and Jean-Marc Vallee are such different filmmakers, you know, but so, as Denis would say, so strong, you know. And there's something about that part of the world that breeds a sense of individuality and a sense of art. I would say Canada in particular is so loving to its artists and to creativity in a way that I don't experience as much in America, particularly like at a very early age. And you can see they make some of the best movies in the world right now, and may that be a model for us here.
Have they taught you any French? Or between Denis and Jean-Marc, any French?
No. Well, Quebecois is a little different. It's hard for me to understand. A lot of like, and like tabernacle, you know, like all the time, you know. That's the one similarity between the two of them. They both say that all the time when they don't like the shot.
Let's see, thanks.
Hi. Seeing Demolition Man, I lost my grandmother 2 years ago. As a reserved person, I didn't cry. I get a lot of the whole, she must be such a bitch, you know? But we were in a waiting room for 2 weeks there. And I think I listed maybe 200 different ways to take apart every piece of furniture, every awful pastel flower, gold-framed picture in that beige room. It was just horrible. And didn't cry once, didn't even affect me when she finally passed. But to be honest, and this is for Jean-Marc as well, I can't imagine getting into that that place, because I was so disconnected from everything. And so I've never seen anything quite that connected me like that. So I really appreciate it. But I need to know how you get into that, because right now I'm emotional and I can't even get into that.
I mean, this is this man, you know. He before a take, he would come up to me and with tears in his eyes, in the space before I even got there, saying, "I'm here first. There's no reason to be afraid where we're gonna go, right?" I think that's really like this character in this movie didn't have that, you know, and I think you find it when you see something and you feel connected to it, and he created a connection and it gave me courage to not feel really, honestly, for a while. Hold back, hold back, hold back, hold back. Now you can go. It's really him. I really can't speak. It's really him. He's a beautiful man and a beautiful filmmaker. So, yeah.
I was wondering if you'd be willing to talk a little bit about the cult anthology that you're producing.
Oh, that I'm producing. Oh, I thought you were gonna. Sorry. Yeah.
And also what got you interested in that topic.
Really? Yeah. Well, my company's developing a project with A&E about sort of extremist groups and cults, and that idea. It's season by season there'll be a different sort of group and person or people around that group that you will explore. The first one being Jonestown, and it's fascinating to me because I'm not really interested in just doing something that is about watching some sort of how people are crazy. I just am not interested in that, and I don't necessarily, like I said earlier on in this discussion, that's not what I want to try and connect to, how we have that in all of us in one way or another. And I think nowadays, we're such a petri dish for that kind of idea, and we can really misinterpret people and give people leadership, and they have maybe more dangerous things to do with it than we think. And he happens to be one of those personalities, and that show happens to be able to give us an opportunity and a palette to be able to show that. And I'm just fascinated exploring a character that you can fall in love with as an audience, really enjoy watching, and then see them do some things that are unfathomable. So just conceptually, that's very interesting to me. And then A&E is amazing because they're saying, go, we want to change this idea of how this whole network is seen. So bring your weirdo to where we are. And that's been pretty amazing.
One of my favorite movies was and still is Donnie Darko. So I just wanted to ask you how you felt while you were filming it, and how do you feel about it now, like after 15 years, about your character? And
did you just say 50?
15.
Oh, okay.
Sorry, I'm from Europe.
Not yet. Not yet.
I think it's 15. It's 2001.
Yeah. I think it's more, maybe.
Sorry.
Yeah. No, it's okay. It's amazing.
Yeah.
How am I feeling about it? It's one of my proudest accomplishments in my career. It was like, it's a movie that exists right where I love to be. It's like the movie that brings up to consciousness what I try and create underneath the character all the time, which is that sort of unconscious world. Like, if you ever want to know what's actually going on in my mind, just go see that movie. And like that is, I'm the team of people, the group of people that made that movie were incredible. The way I feel about it now is, it's really, you look back on a lot of movies you've done and you go like, I love that movie, I love those people, but does it hold? I don't know, some do, some don't. That one just stays there in this amazing place. And it stays there really because of the audience now, So that's how I feel about it. And really, that amazing script that I read, the first time I remember reading that script, it was just like mind blowing. At the same time, like reading Demolition, it's the same thing. Like, Brian, who's here too, like his script, Richard's script, and I go back to script often because that's really the basis. It's everything. I think about that. So, yeah, I don't know. It's cool. I'm glad it worked. That's sort of how I feel generally.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Once again, you've referred to story coming first, and I love story and storytelling, and I make short films up in Ohio, and I write and I direct and I act because I need the control. I need to interpret that, but I can't do it where I'm at. I'm not a Louis C.K. or a Seth Rogen. Like I'm spread too thin. And my question is for both of you actually is how do you make peace with only being able to control the aspects of the story that you're telling? Because right now I see two people that like personally I'm torn as to who like I would rather aspire to be like as a person, as an artist, you know?
Well, that's a tricky question. I feel I'm the happiest person in the world on set in production when you've got a group of creative collaborators that you're, for the most part, seeing eye to eye with, but also challenging each other and growing together and building those type of relationships, and the uncertainties that that were 2 days ago are now certainties. The curveballs are now just in the direct line of fire. I love the adrenaline that I get with making things, and so that can be as small and intimate a production, or as big and exotic and expensive and commercial a production. So it's finding the line of where you're most comfortable, most free, most creative, and then also what actually works practically within the life that you have and the person that you are and the mentality that you have. I'm not a director that storyboards everything and tells you exactly here's the line readings and that, because that's a creative cage for me, rather than the freedom of the stage of working with an actor and letting them loose and getting everybody's ideas and bringing all of that in and then throwing it out in our own weird circus. But everybody works different, and I think that utter creative control is very important, in particular to some people. And for me, it's the collaboration, the energy of other people's minds, and that's exciting too. So it's who you are, where you are, what your resources are around you, and then how you express that.
Yeah, I mean, what's cool working with him is he knows that it's like it's an organism that's going to show you. Like you try and force it another way, it just is bound not to work, and that just comes from experience. And to have someone at the helm of something who's saying, all these people are gathering for a reason, it's going to show me, and I got to move with it and be smart enough and thoughtful enough and acute enough to capture it, And he can say that, but I also know he loves a beautiful shot, And so we have conversations where I say to him, like, I'm not the type of actor where I'm like, just don't, if it's beautiful, tell me where to stand and tell me what to do. Do you know? Like, I don't need to just always be like in my, what you learn, I think, is, it's the same thing about being on stage. It's like you can feel one way inside of a shot, and it will look and feel to the people watching it very differently. And you have to give over to that process. And you have to really trust the people who are at the helm.
Thank you so much.
Hi guys, you mentioned empathy, and I'm wondering about virtual reality. If you have looked at evolution of cinema into that direction, if you think if it's interesting for you to work on that, sharing perspectives and what it means for you as creators. I can tell you. Just launched yesterday, Splash. It's an app here at the finals of the virtual reality at Southpaw, and it's there to democratize virtual reality, so allow anyone to do it. So I'm wondering, what's your take on that?
I mean, I'm down for democracy in general, so that sounds cool to me.
Did you see Lawnmower Man, that virtual reality movie?
Yes.
Yeah. That's about all I know. Yeah. But I do think it's interesting. I don't know anything about any of that, but I'm technically like 3 or 4 years behind whatever is cool and smart. So
That's why he's working with me.
So what do you think, Jack?
but it is, you know, it's beautiful just to, I mean, and it's interesting because I'm 40 years old and watching 20-year-old artists now, where I remember being 24 and making my first movie and I'm the shit. And now it's interesting seeing young artists take new technologies, take new canvases, take new ways to express themselves, to tell stories. And there is the romantic side of me that just loved the way that movies were when I was 11, you know, and between 11 and 14 when, you know, my heart's on my sleeve and, you know, that's just a time when but then to be able to cautiously observe technology as it evolves and let the young and hungry and inspired just grab you by the throat with it until you're like, okay, I'll try it. I love that, you know. If you don't evolve, you're just going to get old and sad.
Yeah, I mean, I also think, I'm personally a fan, I feel like maybe you feel the same way about this, is that I think everything has to come from a particular instinct, you know? And so if it comes from that place and it's helping the narrative, and it really does, that it's not just about spectacle, because narrative is fucking spectacle. It is. I don't know why we get off that point a lot, but tension in narrative is everything. You can spend as much money as you want on a movie making something a spectacle, you know, creating it, but you know, computer graphics, which are extraordinary, but you can also really do it with narrative, you know, and that's why I emphasize like the storytelling part, because I think everything should be used and everybody should be used, and honestly, everybody is their best when the narrative structure works, when it works. Like rushing into stuff without that working, being able to have the balls also to throw something away that doesn't, just because you've like really believed in it and thought about it forever. Usually if you've thought about it for a really long time and really believe in it in this very particular way, you should probably give it up, you know? And that, like, if you can use virtual reality as a narrative implement, like that would be incredible, you know? But it just, anything in existence on its own, I think, is fascinating, but ultimately not as interesting to me.
We got time for one more question before we gotta wrap. Make this one cool.
All right, well, in that case, also production assistant looking for work, guys. No, but I've noticed that in some of your films like Southpaw and Demolition, you both actually have characters where you have to lose yourself and reestablish yourself, but you're also working with children. Now, while they're professionals, do you ever find it difficult creating a dynamic with them, or a scene that they might not fully comprehend what your character is going through?
I mean, I am so much more a child than they are. Like, that's the one thing I start to realize. They, to me, are everything. One of my favorite performances ever is in Searching for Bobby Fischer, the little kid in that movie. There's like this freedom, and his heart is on his sleeve, a sense of sensitivity that is sort of, it's unmatched in most of the adult performances I've seen, you know? So in working with a kid in particular, I usually just give in and say, I'll follow you. That's what I did with Una Lawrence in Southpaw, Judah in Demolition. There's this sense of kind of like, all right, like, show me where we're gonna go, because you're closer to it than I am, you know?
And then we can play games later.
Right, I mean, there's that Paul Simon line that like, I was born before my father and my children before me, you know? And it's like, I think that that's really true, you know? I think that when they come on, they're like, you're closer to something much more, the most important thing, so I'll follow you, and usually that transforms me as a person generally. I mean, Una Lawrence also is, and I mean, all the kids I've worked with have been the best actors I have worked with.
Thank you.
Well, everybody make sure they go see Demolition. What is it, April 8th? April 8th. You'll love it. It's an awesome movie. And thanks for coming today.
Thank you, guys.